QC manager at Total Energies. Doug's gonna get us acquainted with tribology and sustainability and how you can integrate that into your plant reliability program. I'll leave it up to Doug.
Well, hey, welcome everybody. Glad to be part of the LRVS 22 this year. My name is Doug Sackett. I am Senior Field Engineer for Total Energies USA affiliate. Also CLS certified, which is a certified lubrication specialist by the Society of Tribologists and Lubrication Engineers. So I was very happy to hear our keynote speaker today talking about tribology as how they gain their information and advantages. And in this aspect, from what I'm going to teach you today, is how you can be a tribologist and also sustainability and help your facilities on their carbon neutral goals. I did a class last week for the steel industry with all their maintenance and reliability guys from all the major steel companies. And one of the key, I asked them what's the key word for their companies that they're, pushing down. Of course, safety is always number one, but sustainability was the number one answer from those guys. So we as Total Energies, we're so much into it. We were Total before, French oil company, oil and gas company. 2 years ago, we changed our name to Total Energies to focus on clean energies aspects of our business. And like many other companies, we have our 2030, 2050 goals to become carbon neutral. So one of those aspects and what we do is go into plants and operations and show them how to become carbon neutral or reach those goals from the lubrication side or tribology side. So I look forward, you'll see a lot of stuff about STLE. I'd really like to thank Rachel Fowler from the STLE, our editor for the TLT magazine, giving me permission to pull information from the STLE website. Because so at our conference this year in May, that was the number one most attended classes was carbon neutrality, sustainability, and how do we get there. So looking at, this was done in 2016, energy study. You can see in the red, a lot of the energy use is done from the industrial side. I actually showed the steel guys this, where they're at 7.2% of energy consumption. So you can see the products that we're producing is one of the largest consumers of energy in the world. So how do we combat that to become more energy efficient? And also the huge return on investment of this is lower costs. So there's money to be involved, and that's management gets real excited. We all want to make sure we are green and getting to carbon neutral to save our environment, but we also got to make sure we're including the return on investment on that. So this will also show you how to talk to your company about that in some of these projects. So we've got the virtuous circle towards carbon neutrality. It's identifying the low carbon offers. What can we find? Energy improvements, the clean energy mix, how we can put that into our plant, whether it's through solar power, natural gas, hydrogen, electric cars, all the different things, and how to monitor that and follow through with accounting for that. So there's formulas that you can use to account for all the different areas, and hopefully we'll show you some areas today that you haven't thought about to capture some of the CO2. So understanding the companies from our aspect as lubricant base oil manufacturers, suppliers, blenders, Klein did a study recently this year to see how important is sustainability to our organization. From the base oil manufacturers, the additive companies, the blenders, the distributors that market those, and then also the packaging. So we want to be conscious of what we call now cradle to cradle, not cradle to grave, because we don't want anything going back into the environment. We want everything to be completely recyclable, including the bottles that are 5W20s or engine oils come in, or that you buy at the auto parts store. What's the recycle plan on those instead of letting them land in the landfill? So you can see it's important to a lot of the organizations, but as you move forward, you still have a lot that are starting to drop a little bit on our goals. Do we do sustainability reporting? Do we have a full-time sustainability person to look at these aspects? And then do we have a third-party certification? Those are all things as we as a global company that we're doing. to make sure that we're doing it correctly and we document it. So what is sustainability? You know, there's a lot of different words. I had a conversation with my STLE members this morning on that. And explanation, sustainability is often thought of as a long-term goal, while sustainable development refers to the many processes and pathways to achieve it. So both those words go hand in hand, and it can be used for anything, but in this case, sustainability is in your process to become carbon neutral. And how do you reach that goal? It's not something you can do overnight, but you got to have the process and procedures in place to make it a long-term goal and achieve that goal. And as you can see, there's a lot of different things. There's our environment, there's the economics, and there's society. So we have to put all those together to make sure everything works. And then what is tribology? Our two key words. You heard our keynote speaker talk about tribology. So tribology is the study of lubrication, friction, and wear. That's everything that we do as reliability managers in the lubrication field. You just don't understand. Really neat title that you can. I've actually got T-shirts to give out to live audiences when they answer questions from the STLE STEM program, that on the back it says, "I love tribology, doesn't anybody?" with a big heart. And you'll be amazed some of the questions you get on that if you wear it out in public, because nobody knows what tribology is. But it was started, I mean, lubrication started back with the ancient Egyptians, and it's developed into a very technical field that companies in research and development and the bearing manufacturers, pump manufacturers, all have research and departments that are trying excellent products, additives that benefit us, but how do we use them in the field to make sure we're getting the best for them? So Tribology, the Society of Tribologists and Lubrication Engineers, a great organization. There's actually a lot of podcasts on there by Dr. Neil Cantor on sustainability. If you go on their website, there's episode 7, talks about green additives. So a lot of great talk with the additive manufacturers, base oils, bearing, gear manufacturers, all belonging to the STLE from that aspect if you would like to learn more. So the Jost report in 1966, just to give you a little background on the dollar value that goes with tribology. Mr. Jost is considered the father of tribology. He coined the term tribology and did studies on it. In 1977, you can see the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. This is not a lubricant manufacturer, somebody trying to sell you something. These are the mechanical engineers, did a study, and a friction reduction of 10.9% of primary energy consumption had a monetary value back then of $16.2 billion. That was 1977. So think about that, where we're at today and what that number would be. The German Ministry of Research and Development said this could be a savings of 2% of the GDP by reducing friction and wear losses. Because you're not only saving energy by reducing friction and wear, you're saving downtime. You know, you got a dollar value to your downtime, you're increasing reliability. It's a huge dollar amount when you do this correctly and you study the fine art of tribology. So roles of tribology and energy efficiency, you know, the lubricant is what's going to slide, make it slide better. So you've got, this was done by Dr. Erdmir from Texas A&M. You can see he's a fellow at the STLE also. But you can see just on a car how the energy gets used up in many different areas till the energy to move the car is just 21.5% of it. A lot of different areas that are consuming energy. So if they're designing a car, it's one of the things that, you know, they got to take into effect because the government's putting mandates that they have to get better mileage. I've got a 2020 F-150. I'm getting 21 miles to the gallon. My last F-150, I got maybe 15. So new technology, lower engine oil. You see the 0W20s in most factory fill. The Japanese makers are down to a 0.16 and working on 0W8. So they're creating less friction through lower viscosity and more technology. And that's just in the automotive side. So looking at energy efficiency through our equipment and processes, we have what's called the total cost of ownership. You've probably heard this approach, you know, total cost of ownership of a gearbox, of a hydraulic system, you know, your purchase price, your maintenance cost, the oil that goes in it. but add a little CO2 to that, and we call it our TCO2 tool, because we also want to go in and calculate what's the savings by going into these other products. You know, a lot of people look at the cost of a mineral oil and compared to a synthetic, and they don't know how to create a value for the added protection or the added efficiency that goes into it. And hopefully we'll be able to help you with that today. So one of the first things I always like to tell everybody, the easiest one, compressed air leak detections and savings. We just did a compressed air leak, started our process and procedures for our plants in the US, and we did our Linden production plant, and we exceeded the 10% energy savings. So the dollar value we put on that is at least a month and a half of free electric. So easy way to do that. I just like to throw that in there because I think everybody in their plant should be doing air leak audits. One of the easiest ways to save energy and lower your carbon footprint. I think our carbon footprint was lowered by about 86 tons by doing that. Biolubricants being environmentally sensitive, I wanted to touch on those real quick. You can changes anything from engine oils to inside oils. You know, biodegradability goes into the environment. You should always be looking at those aspects. And I always tell everybody, just like food grade lubricants, your biolubricants are not your grandfather's biolubricants. It's just not a drum of vegetable oil. You know, get a good biolubricant with a good additive package that's environmentally friendly, and you'll have great success with your protection on it. With the new EAL category for shipping, and those products are no sheen. They can go into the water, break apart, not have any effect on the aquatic life. Electric motor efficiency. You know, there's new standards in the electric motors, the new IE4, and this is just an example of the savings. So if you replace one 75 kilowatt pump used 1,000 hours is equivalent to $361 a year savings and 700 kilograms of CO2 of avoided emissions. So touching base on those is a couple ways through equipment manufacturers, through new technologies and proper lubrication, you can achieve those. But I want to get into gearbox efficiency and then also greases real fast. So your gearbox efficiency, no gearbox is 100% efficient. So there's equations that can go in there to do that. So how do we make them more efficient, more energy efficient through lubrication? So this is just an example through our friends at Sumitomo, you know, different torques that go in and then come out, what the difference is. So going from synthetics or from minerals to synthetics, where's the advantage? You know you're going to pay more money for your synthetics. So how do you get a return on that? So here you can look at your temperature variable. Shows your gearbox running cooler. Running cooler means less friction, less energy consumption. The motor that drives that, you've got an energy efficient motor. Now you're going to have an energy efficient gearbox by doing this. And you can see the ExxonMobil, my colleagues at ExxonMobil did this on one of their papers. As the SpaceX guy said, Tribology papers, this is where I got this from ExxonMobil. They're all put out there online. And you can see they reduced the temperature, the sump temperature, from 180 degrees Fahrenheit to 167 degrees Fahrenheit, and the efficiency went up 2%. So in a major plant, say a steel mill that has probably 1,000 gearboxes, and you're going to increase the efficiency 2%, that's a huge savings to your bottom line. And your carbon footprint drops with that also. So once again, there's the example of between the mineral, in the synthetics, you got a lower coefficient of friction, creates energy savings. That just means it's sliding better. So you go into your synthetic PAOs, and then you can also get into a lower coefficient with your synthetic PAGs. But a lot of time your PAGs cause problems. You can't mix them with anything else. So a lot of plants don't like putting those into the mix for somebody to cross-contaminate. So PAOs are a really great product to go to. So we did a study at Total Energies, our Paris group over at our test center. In an experimental laboratory analysis, we did a windmill gearbox and then an industrial gearbox in a cement plant, and the ratios and everything. And our references were a 320 mineral oil, a 320 synthetic, but also due to the synthetic capabilities, we looked at the film strength of a 220 synthetic. you got your viscosity index. So you should know that your high viscosity index, the better your viscosity will stay on a plane at temperature variations. So that's some of the key things we looked at. And so we got into looking at the mechanical losses, and you can see the chart at the top where the mineral oil 320 are in the up top, the coefficient of friction is a lot higher than the PaO. And the bottom one, the green one, is actually a PaG. So you're looking at savings and mechanical losses of on a PaO 220 at 40%, running 40% operating conditions is almost 12%. You're far exceeding the 2%. So your lower coefficient, better protection with a synthetic, you can take those numbers, multiply them out times what you're paying per kilowatt, and the cost of the oil is completely irrelevant to the mineral oil. And that's how you propose that to management and making that change. Plus, you're going to get better protection, energy savings. There's a lot of attributes that go with that. So OEM guidelines, how do you save carbon footprint by going to synthetics? You can double the oil change intervals. So not only do you get a savings of man hours by changing it from every 3 years or 17,000 hours to 26,000 hours on this David Brown guideline. Same thing with a Euro drive. You know, you put in the cost of the oil and add in the man hours and everything that it takes to do an oil change, your savings starts to multiply at that point. So just understand that synthetics cost more, but they always go across and have the savings, not only in the energy efficiency, the runtime through oil analysis, and extending the drain intervals is very important on that. So we did a study also on lithium greases, the big one in the world, versus calcium sulfonate complex greases. So worked with SKF on this project. My counterpart, Randy, did an outstanding job. And so we rebuilt some chocks in the steel mill. Because of the shortage in COVID, we only had 3 new Timken bearings, and we reused one SKF bearing that we completely identified, tore it apart to identify any anomalies in it and document those. Verify and reduce the quantity that they were using through a lithium complex, what you could reduce it to for a calcium sulfonate, reduce their grease consumption by 50%. Not only a savings in grease consumption, but also, as you'll see, we saved them in a lot of other areas too. So calcium sulfonate greases, lithium took over the world in the 70s because calcium sulfonate was expensive. Lithium was not. Now we're making more batteries. Lithium has shot up through the roof, supply issues. Calcium sulfonate advantages has starting to show its head to scare off the lithium people and get away from that. And it's just huge advantages. And you can see environmental. It's better on lower temperatures, environmentally, the pH, toxicity, all the different things that matter. So carbon footprint, we calculated out a savings of 16% between lithium and calcium, just making that switch. And these are all the things we're working with the customer on to make them fully aware, because like I said, the steel groups are all looking how to produce what they call green steel. Be energy efficient, be net zero by a certain date. They're no different than any other company. So looking at the temperature reduction, you can see here we dropped it to 135 to 145 range from 145 to 160 range. Big difference. That also extends the life of your grease or your oil. The lower the temperature, the better, but also less friction. Some of the data we put together on there shows a savings. The grease consumption, we actually dropped it per month, almost 70%. Bearings loss dropped by 40%. Production went up, another advantage. And then downtime went down. So you can calculate this out into many different ways of saving. But the key one is also, how do we get to that carbon, that TCO2 that we talked about? So looking at here, we took our grease consumption down with the savings, but we also, that reduces their drum usage, right? The product has to come in some sort of aspect. And you can actually follow some papers, once again, white papers, life cycle of manufactured reconditioned industrial drums. All this data that I'm showing you is on the internet through the STLE, different groups like that. to be able to show them what you can save. But the actual savings was showing them 294 tons per year on just the drum side. So part of your carbon neutral process. And that just, and after 6 months, we also found no anomalies. The bearings were still great, broke down with SKF in-house. And that way we did the follow-up to make sure they were still getting their protection. So cutting off, I think we had 20 minutes. I'm right there at 21 minutes. I want to say that, you know, listening to this, as the SpaceX guy said, be a tribologist. Give yourself a good title because you deserve it as a lubrication engineer, maintenance manager, but also never quit learning. Attend conferences, read papers, understand that never quit learning is our motto. You know, you've got to constantly learn, get involved with people that know, industry experts. That's what I do. I never tell you I know everything, but I know people that do know everything in their fields. So it's a great way to work. So I appreciate your time, and I guess we take any questions now.
Doug, Greg Livingston had a question there. To determine carbon footprint, did you perform life cycle assessment?
We did, and like I said, we documented it through you know, the white papers. Like I showed you, we pulled industry information. We had to do a lot of research because we were taking carbon neutrality to the next level, not just thinking about our energy that we're using at a plant and saving energy consumption, but also packaging. You know, that's a huge industry. I had another slide on the Klein report that talked about packaging. We want to make sure that everything gets recycled, gets reused, from the, you know, your quart bottle you buy at the auto parts store to the drums and kegs you're using in your plant, because it takes a lot of energy to produce those. I think the study showed it was 80, and I'll have to dig through it. The carbon footprint was like 82.3 pounds of carbon CO2 to produce one drum.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Greg, I appreciate you putting up Neil's podcast up there. So the STLE has done a great job in making sure the industry of tribologists and lubrication engineers from every aspect, the universities, there's a great presentation on it from Texas A&M, California Merced, Auburn University. I mean, great groups out there doing a lot of college stuff that is funded also for tribology. I was actually at Auburn University with Professor Jackson a couple years ago. They're doing study on electric cars and the friction and wear on the plug-ins, because you keep plugging it in and unplugging it. Is it going to wear out the parts of the plug? But yeah, and if any questions come up, I'll be glad to shoot me an email. I'm actually taking off on vacation very shortly. So going to go do a little fishing for the weekend, and appreciate everybody's time.